The first time they laughed at me, it wasn't loud. It was the quiet kind of laughter people use when they think you don't matter enough to hear it. A smirk here, a breath through the nose there. The kind that says, "This guy doesn't belong in this room." And standing there in a courthouse that smelled like old paper and cheap coffee, I realized something important. Nobody was laughing because they were confident. They were laughing because they were comfortable. And comfort makes people careless. I grew up in a town called Ridgway Falls, a place where everyone knows your last name before they know your first. My family lived on the edge of town in a house my grandfather built with his own hands. He laid every plank himself, planted the trees out front, and said this land was the only thing no one could ever take from us. Turns out he was wrong. Or at least that's what they thought. By the time I was 35, I was working a job nobody ever noticed. Compliance analyst. Sounds boring, right? Yeah, it was supposed to be. I spent my days reviewing documents, tracing numbers, following rules most people never read. The kind of job that makes people underestimate you before you even open your mouth. And honestly, I liked it that way. The trouble started when the city announced a revitalization project. New condos, boutique shops, glass buildings that looked good on brochures. The problem was our neighborhood sat right in the middle of their vision. And suddenly, inspectors started showing up. Fines, citations, noise complaints for houses that had been quiet for decades. My mother, Evelyn Brooks, stood her ground. She always did. She told them no, told them the land wasn't for sale, told them her husband was buried 10 miles from that porch and she wasn't going anywhere. That's when they took her to court. The judge's name was Harold Denton. Tall guy, silver hair, voice smooth like he practiced sounding reasonable in the mirror every morning. He talked to my mother the way you talk to a child who won't share a toy. Slow, condescending, smiling just enough to make it hurt. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, tapping his pen, "do you understand the severity of your violations?" My mother answered calmly. She always did. Explained the fence had been there for 40 years, the porch was fine, the land was zoned correctly. Denton leaned back and chuckled. Not loud, just enough. And that's when the room followed his lead. The prosecutor joined in. The bailiff looked away, smiling. People behind us whispered. I sat in the back row, hands folded, watching them reduce my mother to a punchline. She was 68 years old, hands shaking slightly, standing alone against a system that had already decided she was expendable. Denton didn't hide it. He had lunch plans. He wanted this over with. He fined her an amount she couldn't pay, suggested the city could seize the property for her own good, and hinted at jail time when she dared to say it wasn't fair. That word set him off. "Fair," he snapped. "The law isn't about fair, Mrs. Brooks. It's about order." I felt something snap inside me then. Not anger, focus. Because here's the thing. They didn't know. For the last 18 months, I had been tracking something strange. Shell companies buying land cheap after court seizures. Judges signing unusually fast orders. Prosecutors moving cases along with suspicious efficiency. I had flagged it at work quietly. Kept copies. Built timelines. Names. Accounts. I never planned to use it like this, but when Denton laughed at my mother, the decision made itself. When the judge ordered her to sign the seizure paperwork, my mother reached for the pen. Her hand trembled, and before I could stop myself, I spoke. "Don't sign that." The room froze. Denton looked irritated like a mosquito had buzzed past his ear. Who said that he barked? I stood up slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't shout. I walked down the aisle like I belonged there because in that moment, I did. "Sir," he said sneering, "this is a courtroom, not open mic night. Sit down before I hold you in contempt." I smiled, calm, steady. "You can try." I reached into my jacket and placed my credentials on the table. Federal investigator, Financial Crimes Division. The prosecutor went pale so fast it was almost impressive. The bailiff stiffened. Denton's smile cracked just a little. I told him we needed to pause proceedings. He refused. Said I had no authority. That's when the doors opened behind me and the rest of my team walked in, badges, visible expressions unreadable. That room changed temperature instantly. We read the charges. Fraud, bribery, Civil rights violations, racketeering. Denton tried to argue, tried to laugh it off, tried to assert authority he no longer had. Watching a man realize power isn't permanent is a strange thing. It drains out of them slowly, like air from a tire. They cuffed him at his own bench. The prosecutor, too. Papers flew. People gasped. My mother covered her mouth eyes wide, trying to process the fact that the quiet son she told to stay out of trouble had just flipped the entire room upside down. But that wasn't the end. That was just the beginning. Because once you pull on a thread like that, you find out how deep it goes. Developers. Council members. A private investment group hiding behind 3 layers of shell corporations. They weren't building condos. They were planning a private detention facility right over the town's water source. Cheap land. Minimal resistance. Maximum profit. The threats came that night. A note on my mother's door. A car following us home. A text that said, "You should have stayed quiet." 2 days later, they tried to run us off the road. Black SUVs, no plates. Professional moves. My partner drove like her life depended on it because it did. Because my mother was in the back seat. When I blocked them in and drew my weapon, they hesitated. That hesitation saved them. Backup arrived seconds later, and that's when we got the name. The real one. The man funding everything. Untouchable, they said. Billionaire, political donor. The kind of guy people warn you about in whispers. I walked into his office with a subpoena and walked out with him in cuffs. No speech, no drama. Just evidence. A mountain of it. 3 months later, we were back in court. Different judge, different energy. Denton shuffled in wearing orange chains clinking where confidence used to live. 22 years. Federal prison, no special treatment. My mother stood when he begged her for mercy. She told him she believed in forgiveness, but justice wasn't hers to give. When the judge declared our land protected permanently, my mother cried. The kind of crying that empties something heavy out of your chest. That night, we sat on the porch they once called unsafe, watching the sun dip behind trees my grandfather planted. She asked why I never told her what I did for a living. I told her because I wanted to be her son first. The job was just a tool. So here's why I'm telling you this. Because people like Denton rely on one thing: your silence. They count on you believing you're too small, too quiet, too unimportant to fight back. And most of the time they're wrong. What would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet? Would you have signed? Or would you have stood up when everyone else laughed? Let me know in the comments. And if you've ever seen power abuse dressed up as the law, share this story. Subscribe for more. Because justice doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it waits patiently for the right moment to stand up and speak.